Force on Game 5 on Friday. We'll be here to talk about it tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day.
If you're O'Connell, you have a serious decision to make. Like, what is, again, he's been hurt now in back-to-back years, McCarthy.
Yeah.
You don't know what you have.
100%.
This is a similar situation to what the Niners did with Trey Lance. Like, if the guy can't stay on the field, and again, the limited, you have to do what's best for the organization.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
Florida State put up 498 rushing yards on this defense, 8 rushing touchdowns, and they almost averaged 10 yards per carry.
Tough scene.
I mean, you got to be kidding me. It should be 60 to 7.
Yeah. Give me the 7.
I just gave you the 7.
Exactly. And
Are you
the
on
extra
this?
point. I'm thinking field goal and maybe a
But
safety.
are you on this? This is your best bet? Okay.
Didn't you read the screen? What, are you not paying attention to the show?
SportsGrid's College Football Today.
I can tell you right now, Jamar Chase is getting moved on a lot of teams. And I understand why. I mean, you don't have Joe Burrow coming back this year. It's just not happening. And then Jake Browning has been less than impressive. There's no doubt about that. So Jamar Chase is still an extraordinary talent, and I think buying him low is interesting. Why? Because if you do look, the schedule does get a little bit easier. The defense is still bad. Jake Browning has been productive.
Fantasy Sports Today, only on SportsGrid.
The Americans got to find answers in these partnerships, and I think they need to look at their who's making these decisions from a stat standpoint.
Well, it's so funny to me, especially coming off of the Walker Cup just a few weeks before, how it just seems like there's this glaring chasm between American partnered match play and American individual, singles match play.
The Smiley Show, only on SportsGrid.
A new International Basketball League moves on without Maverick Carter, plus why the MLB playoffs have been a home run for brands. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Front Office Sports Today from FOS Studios here in New York City. I'm Baker Machado.
And I'm Renee Washington, and thanks so much for joining us as each and every week that we chat the biggest stories in the business and culture of sports. We also have tech entrepreneur Alexis Ohanian on to talk his continued investment in women's sports. But first, let's dive into the headlines in the shooting room.
Yeah, and let's throw some good news over in the WNBA for once, as the finals have been record-breaking for ESPN. Game 1 of the Aces and the Mercury was the most-watched finals Game 1 since the league's very first season 28 years ago. This is 1.9 million tuned in last Friday. That's a 62% increase from last year's finals. Now, Renee, the WNBA playoffs alone are up 16% from last year. 1.2 million people have been watching them.
Yeah, when you look at those increases, it peaked with 2.5 million viewers, which puts it at the second largest finals audience overall since 2000. And the only one it's behind is last year's Game 5 winner or take all between the Liberty and the Lynx. So it's up there in good company for how Game 1 started. And honestly, as you mentioned, it's so positive because in the midst of one of the most tumultuous times of the WNBA, it also gives players a little extra bonus of why they are fighting so hard around the different causes of officiating and salaries and revenue and the different components they want with the CBA coming to an end the end of this month.
Yeah, and of course, we'll see where things go with Game 3 now in Phoenix. Let's move to the NWSL. As Sportico says the Houston Dash are in advanced talks to sell the team. This to a group led by a 24-year-old with ties to China and would value the franchise at $120 million. The Dash are currently owned by Ted Siegel. He also owns the MLS Houston Dynamo, and the $120 million sale would represent a major jump for the Dash, that from their last valuation of just $74 million, and they were sort of at the bottom end of the teams in terms of valuations in the NWSL.
They are, and the Dash have struggled not only on the pitch in terms of soccer, but also with other issues around their front office. I mean, last season alone, they had their goalkeeper coach fired after an investigation for inappropriate sexual relations with a player. They also had their president the head coach who disappeared from June and then was officially parted ways with the club as Fran Alonso moved on. They got rid of their GM as well and did not have a GM until December when they were finally able to replace Alex Singer. So it was a really messy 2024 season. This season has been much better, but it's at least been quieter for them. So this deal has to make sense for them. And as you talk about with having not only a potential buyer, but a buyer that's got ties to a father that's in prison and been involved in communist activity. Not great, but the NWSL is allegedly going to do their due diligence. The owners have to approve it. They've been in talks with this group in the past as well, because they've been trying to get involved in women's soccer. So they're vetting them, and there's nothing official, but they do have to get this right, because the club, but also the league, has been very big on player first, creating good environments.
Yeah, and the Sportico report said that this ownership group would still want to keep the team in Houston as well. Well, Conor McGregor was slapped with an 18-month suspension. This from the UFC anti-doping agency. They say the Irish fighter missed 3 attempted biological sample collections back in 2024. Now, the agency reduced McGregor's ban from 24 months to 18, which coincidentally would end before UFC's planned event on the White House lawn, all that President Trump said would take place on his birthday on June the 14th. Now, McGregor has been heavily campaigning to be included in the White House fight, which would be his first, Renee, in nearly 5 years.
Yeah, to miss those 3 samples within the course of a year is what leads to any sort of suspension, but it's actually between the months of June and September that he did not give his whereabouts so that they could do the random drug testing, and that is an issue with the program that they have in place for the fighters. So that suspension, allegedly around 24 months, was scaled back to 18 months after some negotiations and discussions with UFC. But as you touched on, this does have implications for the White House fight, because Conor McGregor has been one actively talking about making his return for the first since 2021. He was supposed to come back last year, but had a toe injury. So that date has been circled on the calendar for when we might see Conor McGregor in a UFC fight. He actually allegedly talked with Dana White and UFC specifically to make sure he could get his name on that ballot of fighters. So then here comes a suspension. It's like, what's next for Conor McGregor? And now it would make him have to, with that suspension running through March, have a very expedited, short training process to get back involved. I don't know if he'll be able to pull it off.
I don't know, but it will be interesting. All right, well, the rumored new men's and women's international basketball league that would compete against the NBA is now planning to get off the ground next year, with a slew of big athlete investors all involved. But one name not included is Maverick Carter. That is, Front Office Sports can report that LeBron's longtime business partner has no formal involvement with the new league, that despite speculation for months. So what do we know? Let's take a look in today's main event. All right, let's bring in Ben Horney, author of the Asset Class newsletter. So Ben, tell us the latest on this, and why isn't Maverick Carter involved here?
Yeah, so this originally was a Maverick Carter-backed basketball league. That's what the headlines were months ago. I think February or January is when it first came out, that he was advising a group of investors who were trying to raise $5 billion to form this international basketball league. Details were sparse. What we found out is that Maverick Carter is no longer involved. He apparently hasn't been for months, we were told by a spokesman for him, but that the project's still moving forward. Right now they're calling it Project B. We don't know if that will be the formal name or what. And yeah, they're planning this international basketball league that they expect to launch next year.
So this league, tentatively known as Project B, does have a lot of athletes and stars that are backing it, from the tennis side of Djokovic and Sloane Stephens to Candace Park from the WNBA, Lauren Jackson, former football player Steve Young, and others, including from the business aspect, not even just sports personnel, but no LeBron James on this list. Of course, as an NBA player, he could not even have investment in any league or team. So what does this say about LeBron James not being involved, Maverick Carter not being involved, that maybe some of the smoke that we saw is not really anything there?
Yeah, so LeBron James was never involved, as far as we know. Obviously, anytime Maverick Carter's involved in anything, the speculation is going to be that LeBron is involved, but supposedly LeBron was never involved, although LeBron was in that infamous boat photo that took place this summer, which is interesting because that was only a few months ago. I mean, time flies, right? But that feels like it was relatively recent. And we were told that it was about this plan.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
So the fact that Maverick Carter is now out, it feels like that happened, rather quickly and suddenly, and we don't know why. That's kind of the big question that we're still trying to figure out: is why did Maverick Carter leave?
So the other large question, and you mentioned this in the piece, is that this group wants this international league to happen sometime in the fall of 2026. So a year from right now, but it seems like there's still a lot of open-ended questions about structure, infrastructure, players, all these other sorts of things. How are they going to be able to get this off the ground in 1 year? And who could even play in this thing if they have an existing NBA contract?
Yeah, so it does seem difficult for NBA players to play. You could imagine that maybe there are people that are unsigned or recently retired. I'm sure that we can pull big names out of that. the infrastructure, it's still a question. They want to play these tournaments in Europe, Asia, Latin America. They're doing 5-on-5 basketball. They really were highlighting the women's basketball side of it, although they do say that they're going to launch with men's and women's basketball. And in fact, they have even larger plans. They want to do other sports eventually. So they're really trying to rock the whole world of sports with this. They're working with some very notable, I mean, not just the investors, but Elena Beard, who's a former WNBA star. Candace Parker is involved. There's a lot of, heavyweight people involved. But to your point, we don't know exactly how it's going to work, how it's going to look, where exactly it's going to be played. They keep touting that it's going to be the high-level competition and that we are going to have the best of the best. So who exactly does that mean? We don't know yet.
So unlike leagues like Unrivaled, which are 3-on-3, as you mentioned, this is a 5-on-5 league, men's and women's tournaments. Also, I know there were talks about giving players equity as well, components that have been things players have wanted and asked for in their respective leagues. Yeah. So looking at this Project B, do you think it's more of an impactful league negatively on the WNBA, or it would have better impacts on an NBA Euro League as a threat?
Yeah, well, so it does seem like I don't know if you would use the word threat, although maybe you would, but the WNBA does seem more, let's say, at risk because you could see, WNBA salaries, we all know, Caitlin Clark made $76,000 or whatever it was. I can't remember if that was this year or her rookie season. But the salaries are so low compared to NBA salaries. So you could see female athletes, if they are going to pay them commensurate with what they're claiming they will, which they didn't give us specifics, but they did say they'd have equity in the league. Why wouldn't they go for this? And so you could start to see talent being siphoned off into this league. Again, NBA, it seems difficult. Salaries are so high in the NBA and they're only climbing.
Ben Horney, thank you so much. Of course, sign up for Ben's newsletter, Asset Class, over at frontofficesports.com. And coming up next, everyone, tech entrepreneur Alexis Ohanian is joining us live in studio to talk about his big soccer clubs, Chelsea and Angel City FC, and which one might be worth $1 billion one day. That's next.
Shedeur Sanders will be starting for the Browns by week 9. I am buying this. Absolutely. At a certain point, Joe Flacco just not the answer. We know they already made the change. Dylan Gabriel is starting this week. We know that. But maybe a team needs a quarterback, and they're willing to trade for Joe Flacco for some level of stability, and then we simply get nothing out of Dylan Gabriel. He is a rookie quarterback when it's all said and done. Maybe there's just no production from him. So why not just move on to a different rookie quarterback that you have just to see what you have? And then, as George, as you mentioned over the top, you have to evaluate going into next year's draft. So I will absolutely buy this.
The next 4 weeks, Minnesota, Pittsburgh, Miami, New England. The question is this. If they truly believe that Gabriel could be a future starter, you got to give him more than 4 weeks, right? That's 4 weeks is not enough. Minnesota, that's a rough game, all right, being played with England this week. Pittsburgh, they haven't have a defense. Miami is not very good. New England's supposed to have a good defense, hasn't here. I want to sort of go... I think Shedeur Sanders is going to start at some point this week. I don't think it's going to be by week 10, although that does make sense here to name him the starter during the bye week, get him 2 weeks here. I'm going to go more, maybe double digits, week 12, week 14, somewhere around there. Because I'm going to want to give Gabriel a longer run. I think Gabriel might do some damage here against these lesser defenses here. So I think give him a longer runway here. That being said, I do not think Gabriel is the long-term future of this team. I don't think he's a franchise quarterback at all here. I think he's a number 2 at best here. Sanders could be a number 1. I have doubts about him too. I think Sanders has a better shot. So by week 9, by week 10, I'll sell that. But if you would give me a couple more weeks, I would have bought it.
Fantasy Sports Today, Fridays starting at 3 p.m. Eastern, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back, everyone, to Front Office Sports Today with Renee Washington and Baker Machado. Well, some know him as Serena's husband. Others know him as the Reddit co-founder. But in the sports world, there are a few that are as invested in women's sports as our next guest, including his soccer clubs Angel City and Chelsea Women, who are vying to become the world's first billion-dollar women's sports franchise. Plus, of course, he's got his all-women's track and field meet, Athlos, gearing up for its second meet coming up here in New York City this month. So let's bring in Alexis Ohanian. Alexis, thank you so very much for joining us. And let's start with Athlos. Congratulations on the second meet and the second year for this. How have you been able to sort of make this work when so many other other, track and field startups have really sort of struggled out there.
Yeah, our mindset from the very start, we announced this last April at our Businesswomen Sports Summit with Gabby Thomas and basically said, look, we see this opportunity. These are stars every 4 years. It's one of the most watched sports in the Olympics. And then they seem to disappear in between. So what's the first thing we can do is we can create a meet that becomes a must-go-to, must-attend destination for the best athletes in the world. Obviously, Gabby Thomas is one of them, and we're grateful to have her as a part owner now as well as athlete. And we just doubled the top prize. It was $30,000. We made it $60,000. We threw in a beautiful Tiffany crown, and then we created a spectacle. And so, this Friday night under the lights, we're running it back. Sierra's going to perform this year. DJ Trauma is spinning in between each of these meets. Now, this is a fully sanctioned meet. This is a real deal meet.
But it's a party.
It is a party. And we wanted to blend. You look at something, the Kentucky Derby is going to do $150 million in profit. And, the average person can't name a single horse or jockey. And very, very few people are actually going to go to Kentucky. But it's still a tremendous, tremendous event.
Right.
But I'm looking at these athletes that are effectively doing the same thing, going from point A to point B as fast as they can, except not on horses. They're doing it on feet.
Yeah.
And unlike these unknown stars of the world of horse racing, these are some of the biggest celebrities in sport, incredibly telegenic, incredibly compelling. And we have brands lining up, Cash App, Instacart, Tiffany, Toyota, to be alongside them because they do every 4 years during the Olympics. Why not the rest of the time? And I'm grateful. We focused on the business first. We focused on making sure these athletes get paid. They got paid within 3 business days last year. That wasn't good enough. They're getting paid within minutes.
And what I enjoy, Alexis, about everything that you're doing with Athlos, but also in all your investments, including TGL, it's in sports, it's in women's sports specifically, providing it for the players, the resources, the pay, the tech involvement as well of advancements to really make it an experience.
Yes.
Do you see other sports following the model or even other leagues that you're creating in what you've been doing?
Look, we want to set the bar. We definitely stand on the shoulders of giants, and I think what makes it so compelling, the reason I got into women's soccer when I did in 2019, similar pattern matching with track and field. The Women's World Cup was coming. Everyone paid attention in 2019 to these athletes. The biggest brands in the world were paying attention, and then they disappeared for 4 years. And that didn't make sense. And so I have to say, right, the reason these sports have been so successful as investments is because the excellence was already there on the pitch.
Let's talk about the rise of a lot of these sports teams that are out there. Everybody wants to know what's going to be the first women's team that's going to reach $1 billion.
I'm betting
a lot of people think
Chelsea.
it's a lot of people think, you including, that it might be Chelsea women.
Yeah.
What's it going to take for you guys to get there, and why is it that team specifically?
Well, look, we certainly were early in sort of starting the trend with Angel City, and I think there's a very good chance there as well, especially given how big the U.S. market is and how much room there's still to grow. Chelsea has the advantage of having a tremendous trophy case, right? Chelsea is widely known on the men's side, especially on the women's side, as just being the best of the best of the best.
Oh, yeah.
English football, English soccer, right? It has the aura of excellence thanks to the Premier League and just the history. They invented the sport after all. And so I think as a global brand, the Chelsea women, not just standing for excellence and the success of the women's club, which has pioneered a lot of things for women athletics in general, but also just the success they've had on the pitch, the brand it represents. I think it'll be curious. I mean, look, I'm obviously pulling for both of them, but I think for sure they're the front runners in football. I do think we'll probably see a WNBA franchise in those ranks pretty soon here. But that's because, part women's basketball. Again, we invented the sport of basketball in America.
Yes.
Women's basketball has been so amazing for decades. And now with this recent wave, people are realizing we should be investing even more. And so I'd be bullish on
the Valkyries are almost there. They're almost halfway there.
Yes.
And credit to Jess. Jess was our head of revenue when we started Angel City. And she's just been a dynamo over there for the Valkyries in Gold State. And then got to give credit, Kayla Green was the woman who built the brand of Angel City for us when we started. She's come with me. She did it again with LA Golf Club. She did it again with Athlos. So if you love any of those brand or community things, it's credit to her. And what's exciting is, again, in all these conversations, it's about building revenue, which is bottom line. For most of these leagues, it starts with the team level brand deals, right? Think all the logos you see, the front of kit sponsorship. Then it requires investing money in more promotion to keep those stadiums full, to keep the fans excited and engaged. So you are spending money to make money. And then the way that pays off is when those media deals get renewed. And so, it's sort of chunky. It could happen in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. When I started Angel City, the lifetime Network. I'm sorry, Lifetime.
I remember
Lifetime
this.
was where
Yes.
y'all were playing.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
And I pulled up to that first Board of Governors meeting, and I was like, wait, are you kidding me? Like, you're showing your games on Lifetime. Like, I can tell you why no one is watching.
Right.
It's because Lifetime is not for sports.
Right.
Like, or you're not
Well, it's
even
also a
trying.
declining cable asset, too.
It's not where sports
Sorry,
played.
Lifetime. They're gonna make a Lifetime movie about me.
I'm trying.
Me in it. But it was such a perfect example of why these teams were struggling. And what was so surreal to me was I've been in a lot of boardrooms over the years. I'm very blessed. Like I started Reddit right out of college. I've not been in rooms of people who were not trying to build billion-dollar companies. I've never been in a space like that. And so for the first time in my career, 15 years in, I'm in a boardroom full of ostensibly successful business people, all men, who didn't want to build billion-dollar companies. I mean, candidly, none of them had before, but still, they could have, potentially, if they were willing to invest in these teams, but they just didn't even have that mindset. And the very best of them thought of it as a charity. And I'm just like, y'all, don't do this because you got a daughter who likes soccer, or granddaughter likes soccer. Do this because you think there's tremendous value here. The irony of all this, athletes like yourself had no choice but to play a zero-sum game in professional sports. If you're not good enough, you're out of a job. And the sad reality is, even if you were good enough, you still had to have another job because you weren't getting paid enough for it. But in all these other sports, you had women for decades having no choice but to be excellent and play these zero-sum games every fucking day. And yet, often, the men on the business side of the house could afford to be mediocre.
Right.
And that's the greatest tragedy because it didn't take, it wasn't me showing up to do it. It was the fact that someone was showing up to do it. And the sad irony is it could have happened 10 years earlier.
Right.
And that's why it's important to have business minds like yourself with the vision that are involved.
Amen. Alexis, we're so glad that you are doing this for women's sports, and we're going to continue to watch all the good stuff that you're watching.
Y'all are welcome to Athos. We're taking over Times Square. It's open to the public. Thursday night, we're doing the long jump. Best long jumpers in the world. They're literally going to be jumping 42nd Street, Times Square in New York. Come one, come all. It's open to the public. It's gonna be a little wild.
I love that.
But then Friday night, we're gonna do it at Icon. Y'all are invited. It's gonna be a blast.
Amazing stuff. Alexis, thank you so very much for joining us, and congratulations on everything. And we got more Front Office Sports Today headed your way right after this quick break.
At this event, people from Amazon and Alexa made it very clear that in addition to the sports highlight coming up, you will be able to perhaps buy sports tickets to events, buy movie tickets, arrange fantasy football teams, and I think somewhere down the road, maybe not too far down the road, given the NBA on Prime deal, they will allow sports betting on the television set through Alexa Plus.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
I'm done with the Buffalo Bills, and I'm not upset about it because they look vulnerable. I cannot believe this team is 4-0 because they could easily be 1-3. They are on their heels, and I can't believe they have not one but two double-digit victories in games they could have very well lost.
In-game live, only on SportsGrid.
The Americans got to find answers in these partnerships, and I think they need to look at who's making these decisions from a stat standpoint.
Well, it's so funny to me, especially coming off of the Walker Cup just a few weeks before, how it just seems like there's this glaring chasm between American partnered match play and American individual, singles match play.
The Smiley Show, only on SportsGrid.
Mike Trout, will he ask for a trade? And maybe I'm a bit of a Neanderthal for asking this, and people are going to say, listen, he's never leaving. I refuse to accept that we're just not going to get Mike Trout postseason baseball ever again. Because clearly when healthy, he can still do it. But he's also rarely healthy and still kind of expensive. It's complicated.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back, friends of Front Office Sports Today with Renee Washington and Baker Machado. Well, the MLB playoffs are at a fever pitch as ESPN says their wild card series ratings were up 64% from last year with all audiences. And get this, Renee, up 89% with viewers under the age of 35. So let's dive into some of the other big metrics that we're seeing with the MLB playoffs. Let's bring in our friend Jay Prasad, the CEO over at Relo Metrics. So Jay, what other sort of data are we getting from the Major League Baseball playoffs so far?
I think the results are obviously speaking for themselves, and I think baseball and MLB has done a lot of work over the last couple of years to sort of shorten the game, right, with the pitch clock, and then that was driving some more interest, easier to consume it either in person or on TV. MLB has always been very strong in social media, right? They've always outperformed the NFL in social. They're only second to the NBA, but the NBA season is shorter. So they have been reaching out to younger audiences this way and being able to create some more fan experiences. And then I think you've got this new playoff format, right? And I know that it's been shuffling around. It was like a one-game play-in, and now the early playoff rounds are best of three. That's pretty high tension and high drama.
Yeah, and Jay, we've seen some, honestly, frustration regarding the wild card round, the format of the best of three, the best of five for the DS. But as the numbers show, as Baker just mentioned, things trending in the right direction, especially for the younger ages. What are you seeing in terms of trends regarding the opening rounds of action that really points to baseball is getting it right statistically? Is there anything else that jumps out that we should pay attention to?
Yes, social media engagement, right, around highlights, the favorite players. We've seen an increase in the amount of branded social content, right? So, the playoff teams are obviously taking advantage of this opportunity and working with their biggest sponsorship and corporate partners to really sort of bring them into the playoff excitement.
One of the other stats I thought was really interesting at ESPN's ratings release, I mentioned obviously they were up 89% with viewers under 35, but they were up 107% with viewers under 17. Is this sort of a template for other leagues, maybe for Major League Baseball, who's been criticized for being too old school for so long, a template to go after younger demographics, knowing that Major League Baseball is getting younger viewers interested?
I think it has to, right? Because people were kind of leaving baseball for, the pastime, and that they're not quite modern enough to get it. But they have made series of improvements and changes, and it's clearly working. And those numbers for youth viewing, because it's hard to get them to watch anything on the big screen,
yes,
right?
Totally.
So it is pretty amazing.
Are there any specific players or teams you noticed between the wild card round and the early portion of the division series that were really trending in a popular search?
Yeah, so when it comes to engagement, the viewership, and the search, it goes without saying that the bigger market teams are going to be the big drivers. But you also have regional rivalries too, right? Brewers and Cubs, and that does get national following, even though it's a regional rivalry, right? It does attract. It shouldn't just be the biggest payroll wins.
In the last little bit we have with you, obviously there's on-field stats that give us an idea of who might win the World Series, but is there any sort of stat or trend that you're seeing that maybe could say who might make the World Series based on just the metrics that you're seeing?
Probably not the ones we see, but I think some of our friends at Genius Sports and Sport Radar, I think they have betting and prediction markets, and if you look at Poly Market, there's definitely some interesting trends there. One other thing I wanted to talk about, because this was really interesting. So last season was the first year there was like a helmet sponsor for the playoffs, right? And it was this company, Engelbert Strauss, from Germany that no one really heard of, but it's like this workwear company, and obviously that's been like a fashion trend, right? Carpenter jeans and whatnot. I've seen them all up and down.
Right. But now everybody wants to know about them because they're on every helmet.
And the search volume went up 30x during the first two runs of the playoffs. It went down as people figured it out, but mission accomplished on that, right?
Jay Prasad, the CEO over at Relo Metrics, thank you so much. And let's see what's bubbling over at the FOS water cooler. Well, Renee, here's a Woj bomb. Former NBA scoop master and current St. Bonaventure men's basketball GM Adrian Wojnarowski is launching a new weekly YouTube series called The Program with Woj. Now, this show would help raise money for the school's NIL collective. Woj, of course, shocked the sports world when he walked away from his $20 million ESPN contract to become the GM of his alma mater, who ended up winning 22 games in his first season. But he did say, look, we're not a big school in the SEC and all these other ones, so it's hard for us to find money, and we have to do it very creatively.
Yeah, I mean, they did win 22 games, which was a positive, but they were 500 in conference play. Yep. They did not make the NCAA tournament. So they have aspirations to continue to grow on the court. And in the era that we're in around college sports, what better way to do that than to increase your NIL funding? And so for Woj, he did very clearly mention this is about the program. It's about generating revenue for his alma mater. It's not about him making any sort of return as an insider. So making sure to clarify this is strictly about St. Bonnie's and not about us possibly getting a return for him. So I think it makes sense for the program to be able to be in place to help support the program.
Yeah, and of course he's using all of those contacts from all those scoops that he's done to bring them as guests onto this show. But look, you have to be enamored that he's being creative in how to get money wherever he can. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this edition of the show. Renee and I are back tomorrow for